Alrighty, so I think we're on now. There we go. I am wiped out. Funny thing about plotting to go cross country by flight. Of course, 5 days before that happens, I get myself a cold of some kind. So I'm hoping I can sleep it off in the next couple of days. Started last night, so I hope it's like a 2 day or a 3 day cold and it's gone by the end of that time period. And I'm on my way to recovery and ready to go. And I hop on my flight because it's going to be a haul. It's going to be tough. That flight's going to be. It's going to take me a while to get there. So I'll have to get up early, get there, wait around the airport for a bit, grab the flight out to California, sit in California for 7 or 8 hours. Oh, I think I'm sitting at that airport for 12 hours. Yeah, not my favorite aspect of that. And then leave the airport in San Francisco and catch a flight out to Honolulu somewhere in that 24-hour period of time. Well, counting the bus ride down there, it's probably going to be 28 hours. Somewhere in that length of time, I'm going to need to be able to get some sleep. I'm going to need to be able to eat something. So I got to figure some stuff out for that. If the bus ride down to the airport from here, that should take about two 2 hours total, and I can bring food with me to the airport. Probably going to be like an hour and a half to 2 hours in the airport, so I can get something to eat there. I might be able to nap on the plane, and I suppose I could maybe nap in the seats at the airport in San Francisco for a bit. Find something to eat at one of the food vendors there, or a vending machine if I have to, but I really don't want to eat that. That stuff's not good for me. It's likely to make for a rough trip. And then sleep on the plane over to Honolulu if I can. And get to Honolulu. I've got to figure out how to get to a bus terminal and get a bus pass for the day. Um, but once I get to Honolulu, um, I have to catch a 1 hour ride over to the west side of Oahu and check in with where I'm supposed to be staying for the first 2 days. Yeah, it's a lot weighing on my mind right now. But yeah, so I got to plan all that, and hopefully this cold goes away before I get on that flight, because that, the trip to Hawaii is gonna suck if I still have this cold by then. But that's not what this is about. This is about um, two of the categories of content we did um, thus far. So the book would be the first one, which I did I pull up? No, I was going to pull up some files on some of that. I don't think I can get it to show on this one yet because I can't load a whole document. Like I might be able to get OBS to let me do now. I like a screen capture of what I'm working on would show the window for YouTube as I'm keeping track of that. So that I don't think that's what we need. Where did I store my book for the project? It's a PD. It's a file for LibreOffice. No, 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 that's recipes. No. I really need to do some cleaning up, which I should probably do before I depart for my trip, too. Oh, there we go. Is that one of them? Yes. Yeah. I've got multiple drafts stored haphazardly on a cluttered desktop right now. Not a good sign. I need to keep better track of that stuff. All right, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to maybe read some of what I was working on. What was it we were going to read? Oh, there's one little bit I may reword or I may just remove altogether where I was like, if you've ever puzzled your way through something you didn't understand and finally cracked the code, you know what that breakthrough feels like. Guaranteed glory doesn't do that. Being able to do a thing without stretching your limits is the empty calories of experiences. The wonder is missing in the experience. And you only get that wonder uh, from uh, risking mistakes. I think I might change that to risking being wrong, since that's the general theme of the book. Um, we have to keep in mind that failure itself is a word, an abstraction with values. That's an abstraction, not and abstraction. See, these are all things that I need. Like, I go over it, I need to catch it, I need to redraft it. So, Anna, we need to keep in mind that failure itself is a word, and an abstraction with values associated to it by context we experience as young people. But I posit in a new language that I am no. Okay, missing a line there. Yeah, I shouldn't do this when I have a cold and I'm drowsy. Failure. Failure is not a person or a being of any kind. It is the abstract concept of a result from choices or actions that do not meet the wanted result. When framed as such, it becomes clearer, to me at least, that it's possible, even probable, that you will get a valid and even valuable result, a person or an event, that is nonetheless not meeting the wanted results. That's poorly phrased. Maybe I just read that wrong. Hang on. When framed as such, it becomes clear to me, at least, that it is possible, even probable, that you will get a valid and even valuable result, a person or an event, that is nonetheless does not meet the wanted results qualification. I need to rephrase that. This isn't an error of the result in many cases, but instead one of the expectations. So I need to rephrase that. So basically, that's stating that um, failure, when you define it as an abstract concept of a result that doesn't meet the expectation, the wanted result, when you define failure as that, you become more aware of the fact that it is possible that you can get a valid or even valuable result that doesn't meet your expectations. And that's a problem of the expectations, not a failure. A failure isn't a um, weakness of the thing you had expectations of. Yeah, that's a hard way to phrase that. So I got to readjust that in the second drafting. Some of the other things, I tried to take some clips out of the writing to, and maybe context makes that more clear. Um, but I tried to take a few clips out so that I could read off some stuff that I thought was worth exploring and sharing about. Like wasn't just like a novel goof around with ideas. Like some of the ideas I had for this were fun aspects, but like I'm really going into this as a real analysis of bias and moral wrongs and logical fallacies. Ignorance, being wrong, failure, all these things are not things in much the same way that cold is not a thing, but an absence of a thing. Cold is the absence of heat, and similarly, ignorance and being wrong is the absence of information or understanding, and failure is an absence of achieving the desired outcome. The important that's important, the desired outcome, not success. You can set out to create something and get something other than desired, thus a failure. But what you get can be a success nonetheless. If you instead focus on the desired outcome and cannot see the success because of it, that is uh, that is yeah. I need to rephrase some of that. Man, going back through and editing is really like disheartening sometimes. um, uh, and being willing to stretch through those gaps in ourselves to find wonder past the known, understood, and secure. And in doing so, we grow to fill the gaps and to incorporate wonder in ourselves. So it is sort of a very philosophical treatise on what it means to be wrong and how to relate to being wrong without feeling um, worthless or flawed, or embracing the flaw of not being perfect. I think that's really like the overarching theme of where that was going. So it's I may have to remove a lot of the highfalutin words. Makes it a little bit less relatable when it's worded that way, and I need to make it a little more like that's that's all from the intro, like the intros and the summary at the end. So it's meant to kind of introduce you into the topic, and I think the way they're phrased, it's too academic on the concept of bias, fallacies, and moral uh, and ethical standards. Um, it's it's not as easily relatable, and the main body of the work are entries of almost treating them like you've encountered a like you're bird watching, and it identifies this is this species of bird, and this is where you're most likely to encounter them in the wild, and these are its habits, and these are how to catch an image of it or find one, um, and how to, in the case of these things where they're fallacies and biases and stuff like that, how to avoid falling prey to them. So, like those entries are a little more like safari journal entries sort of things, and so that's a little more fun and relaxed. Whereas what I've got for my opens are they're very textbooky, kind of professorial kind of way of talking, and I need to readjust that, and that's part of the reason why I haven't gone further with it. Like, it needs to be redrafted, is what it needs to be. Like, the bulk of it is probably okay, but to really communicate concepts better, I need to not resort to that jargony academic way of phrasing things. I need to everyman it up. So that's sort of where that is right now. And it's sort of disheartening because, like, again, I did that to myself. I could have written any number of much easier nonfiction books to do, or I could have chosen to do a fiction book, and it would be done by now. But I ended up creating a project and then creating it more complex than it needed to be. And so now I'm chasing that little goose across the field. But anyway, so that's sort of where that's at right now. But I do really like that book is going to exist. Like, yeah, I never would have considered myself like a serious nonfiction writer. I might do a little fun or like encouraging. Like, I would avoid specifically self help books because I find them sort of like um, snake oil in a lot of cases. They're just uh, they're repackaging self discipline and pep talks and selling them as like a solution to your discontent with whatever bothers you in your life right now. And I find them unpleasant when I think about them. Like, they're really, if you've read any four self help books, you will recognize a pattern in them. And they inherit that pattern from a lot of the self help marketing pyramids that went in the early days of the 1900s. And they really haven't changed much. They're just repackaging. And like, a lot of what they're repackaging isn't genuine help. We understand more about human psychology and human sociology now than we did then. And I don't see a lot of people discussing, some of the better understanding we have these days and framing it in a way that's productive and useful for the average person these days. It's all make you feel like you can do anything, and the law of attraction and the richest man in Babylon and Think and Grow Rich, and it's all that same stuff. And like, a lot of that stuff leaves a bad taste in my mouth because I know it's redressing the same pig over and over again to make us think we're getting infinite different varieties of food. It's just, so I wouldn't mind doing some reworking of some of that stuff, but um, the thing about it is, like, a lot of those books are really just, you can cut and paste an entire self-help book and just rephrase the sentences and rephrase the paragraphs into your own words, and it's it's faster and it would probably sell, and I'm not comfortable doing that. So I'm making it more difficult than it has to be to do something else. Um, but there are some genuinely helpful things that could be done. And you can use some of those existing templates and fix the parts that are broken and add substance to the hollow words. And it would be faster than what I'm doing right now. Um, but so that's the book. I'm ready to leave that one behind and just continue playing with it in the meantime. Um, the other category of thing I wanted to talk about was the mukbangs that I did, the food taste tests. Now, half the fun of doing that was trying new things. But the other half of the fun of doing that was figuring out things that might be worth trying to learn how to make from scratch. And so I went back through and I want to summarize like the things that I thought might be worth trying to do. Well, for starters, there are a couple things that were food items that I included in one of the episodes that like don't fit with the rest of it. Like pot stickers or dumplings. I want to make dumplings or pot stickers from scratch. I just want to be able to do that. Like they're a good source of tastiness no matter what ethnicity of food you do. I would like to be able to make them. And then the other one from the Korean food that I really want to try to do was kimchi. Now that's just fermenting cabbage, so there are ways to do that. It's not going to make a good episode to do it on camera. I couldn't do it live because, well, maybe like I could maybe do the starting a batch at the same time that a batch finishes. I could probably do that. I'll think about that. Um, but one of the other things that I wanted to do, like I feel like I should have done when I did the American breakfast ones, was eggs Benedict. My family used to own a bed and breakfast when I was little, and we make eggs Benedict in a distinctive way. And I learned how to do it when I was young enough that my mom was a teacher, so as 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 I got older, she went back to teaching after they sold the bed and breakfast, and she would be gone really early every morning. And there was a stint of time that after I learned how to make eggs Benedict, that I would make myself eggs Benedict for breakfast at least 2 times a week. And I didn't think anything of it. This was just something that I knew how to do, and I could make myself something that was tasty and I enjoyed. Now, it's only as I've gotten older the realization that there are people who have never had eggs Benedict and for whom just the name alone is extravagant rich people food. And here I am, the poor son of an elementary school teacher who has enough know-how to make it for breakfast every morning. And like there are a few things like that in my history where I learned this skill and I grew up knowing it from a young enough age that I did not realize that that is something not a lot of people get to experience. So um, I would like to do an episode of making eggs Benedict. Because it'd be like a good nostalgia trip for me to have eggs Benedict again for the first time in a couple decades, and B because it's fun to explore like things that are classic foods from my growing up. But of the foods I taste tested, and we can go into the like American breakfast foods. I could make our family style French toast again too. I wouldn't mind revisiting that, showing off what like real homemade French toast would be like. I have never, I have never made waffles, so I would like to try to make some waffles. I don't know what kind of way I'd twist it to make it interesting and different waffles, but I'd like to try to make some waffles. Um, all right. So, speaking of American foods, the American junk food, what did I call that? Classic American fast food stuff. Like the Philly steak and cheese I had was okay, but I mean it was all freezer food, so it was like it was could have been better. I want to make it better. I want to make a real one from scratch. But of the taste tests I did do, those onion rings, they were like a Red Robin style. I think that's the name of the restaurant they're from, like a Red Robin style onion ring. Those were good. I need to find out how those are made so I can make some. So I would do like a Philly steak and cheese with onion rings. That would be a good like make from scratch and taste test. Moving into some of the other categories, like the Italian, I when I had the Italian foods, there was a lot of different types. Overall, I think if I were to do a cooking from scratch, I would want to make my own noodles. I want to try to make my own noodles of at least two different types, like a linguine noodle and maybe like a shell or something like that. And I figure like the two things that I think were really perhaps, the lasagna is really good, but I don't want to make a whole dish of lasagna. What I'd like to do is see if I can crack that mushroom cream sauce and maybe do like the shells on that. No, I could do that on linguine. Mushroom cream sauce, and then the chicken and pesto on rigatoni. I think I would want to do maybe on the shells because that was that was a really good pesto. It was like a very garlicky pesto, but I loved it. So I think those are the two dishes for the Italian day that I would redo from scratch. The Hispanic, I've never made a chimichanga. I've made burritos galore, but I've never made a chimichanga, and I'd kind of like to give a shot to that. But I'd also like to try to make empanadas because I've never made empanadas, and I'd never had an empanada until I had the ones from the freezer section. So I imagine they pale in comparison to the real thing. I like to make the real thing. Um, but so that's Italian and the Hispanic, um, the American, and then the American breakfasts. Thai food, pad Thai. I have to figure out how to make pad Thai. I need to. I need to have that again, but made fresh. Um, there wasn't a lot in the Thai food that I really went for heavily, but they did have like the tom yum soup. I'd be willing to try learning how to make that too. So, like, I'd be up for that. And then after the Thai food, I did the Indian food. Now that one, there was a lot in there that I liked. Now chicken tikka masala, there's sort of Indian. It's Indian inspired. I think it was made in uh, England first, but so I would like to make that. But of the actual Indian food, the Punjab eggplant I would make again, and I want to know how to make that from scratch. And then there was the gram lentil dal, which I think that would also be really nice to be able to make. Um, and then well, before all of that was Korean. And the two Korean dishes that I most would love to repeat would be the japchae with yam noodles, which I'm intensely curious about. See if I can figure out how to make that all from scratch. And then the pork and noodles in gochujang sauce. So I'd like to do that. And I think, being able to try to do those recipes from scratch, um, like I could do like what's that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, maybe 18 dishes. If I do the Philly steak and cheese and the onion rings together as one episode, then we can cut it down. Like, I feel like most of the others are sort of like a one at a time kind of thing, but I would enjoy greatly doing a series of, say, 16 or 17 episodes of recipes from scratch. So I may next time around for food category live videos, I may do cooking these things from scratch. So that's sort of where I'm thinking of going with that. I may also do like um, a blog, like a food blog of different foods to try from scratch. I've got a lot on my plate between my two channels already, but I've considered, like, last year I went to VidCon in California, and I met a couple of like the people in charge of Twitch, which is the live streaming service that a lot of gamers use. They're doing a lot of non-gaming content now, like art and cooking and stuff like that. And like they've really got me thinking about the possibility of doing a cooking show on Twitch. Like, I don't know that I need another channel. Like, when I originally started planning for a YouTube channel, it was going to be a cooking show. I still probably will get to that one on YouTube. It's going to take me a little while to build up what I need to get ready for that. And then I started my tinkering channel and then this channel. And I have sort of plans to do like a science education, like a STEAM education content division of the other tinkering channel. And then this channel, I had an idea of like a parallel channel where I will eventually maybe move like some of this sort of stuff where I look at like what we were talking about last night, like what kind of ways are there to make money from sound effects, or what kind of ways, like side hustles and productivity. So like what that sounds wonderful and all, but what that ends up meaning is I have like the Roving Jack channel doing the makerspace tours, my own tinkering, and then its side channel, which I'm calling, I think it was Steaming Mad, where it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, mad science, mad mathematicians, mad engineering, that kind of stuff. And so that's two channels, and this one with uh, the marketing and um, informational and some top 10 lists and that kind of stuff as a side channel to this. That's four channels. And if I get started on my cooking channel on YouTube, that's five channels. And like it's starting to build up. And it's just like, I need to see what I can do with what I've got for the two channels right now. And if I get them going well enough, maybe I could hire some editing help at a future point. And once I've got, you know, somebody helping me produce content and edit it, then it becomes easier for me to expand into those territories. But like, to think about adding a second cooking channel for Twitch, like Live streaming it would be easier than the editing and recording and all that fiddly bits, but um, yeah, it's far enough out that I'll wait. I will do a test run of doing a cooking show here on this for like a week and a couple months, but I don't know that I'll chase that one very far past that point. Like, I can write a cookbook. I could do a food blog occasionally with like I feel like it would be more like go onto Tumblr and once a week post a new recipe with a little commentary. And then and that was originally one of the ideas. I had set it up so that each day of the week had its own sound alike. It was Munch Day, Views Day, Friends Day, Thoughts Day, Phrase Day, Chatter Day, and Song Day. So they all had potential applications. So like Sunday would be writing songs, Monday would be food related posts. And so like doing a Monday food blog, um, like I could still do that. Like making a new food and exploring foods once a week, that's totally worth it. Um, composing pictures for it, that makes it a little bit harder, but if I set up a little picture booth that I can take the pictures with, I could probably do all right with that. Oh, yeah, the ear infection's back, so that's fun. Oh, that'll be great. Oh, great fun. All right. Yeah, so like I had a lot of fun doing the mukbangs. It's weird looking back at the view counts on those because they're some of the highest view counts on the live video feeds. So I think it has an audience. Um, I don't think I'm up to that level of eating anymore. Like that was hard on me. My body, my body doesn't tolerate that well. Um, but like I could try a new dish once a week. Uh, but that was sort of fun to do anyway. I feel like I missed certain things. Like if I were to do it again, I'd also try like Greek food and like I could try some German stuff, but for the most part, that's just like different types of sausage, isn't it? Um, like French food might be a little different from some of the other things, but like French is such a culinary culture that finding like signature French dishes might be hard to do. Like escargot is about as far into the French specific foods that I can think of. Oh, well, that's just going to be a plugged ear for the rest of the week. I can't figure that one out. All right. Um, but yeah, food is a fun category to play with. Like, actually, the tutorial I want to do for Instructables in the next day or so is a food item, which is funny because like when I thought about Instructables and some of the stuff they do, I would think that like recycling and tinkering would be the things they do more Instructables for, but thus far the two that I've entered as contests have both been food related. The first one I did was a set of pistachio cookies. Um, they were like a almond macaroon, but they were made with homemade pistachio flour. They were pretty good. And then the one I'm gonna try to do in the next couple days is one I invented a few years ago for a family gathering that I went to. I was just kind of like, I wonder why don't more people do like you ever go to the, like Dunkin' Donuts or a donut place and get jelly filled donut holes? And I'm like, I wonder what else we could fill those with. And then I found out how easy it is to make donuts, and I went, oh wow, I've totally got to try to do this. And so I ended up making a batch of cheesecake filled donut holes with a dark chocolate glaze, I think I did on the top. And they were fairly popular. And I've since then done like cheesecake filled donut holes. They're sprinkled with the graham cracker crumbs to give it a little bit of the graham cracker taste. You use some dark chocolate on top. And I've done a couple times, I've crushed up freeze dried strawberry and sprinkled that on top of the dark chocolate. So it's like a strawberry chocolate cheesecake. Um, but you can also do like a salted caramel on top of the chocolate or just a straight salted caramel as a glaze. And so I want to do that as an entry because I think that has a chance of winning. And the grand prize for that one is the stand mixer, which would be really awesome to play with. Um, but yeah, so that's the food category. Now, yeah, the science tinkering for the other channel is something I want to do. Like, I I do want to do like semi-regular updates on like um, just a fascinating topic of science, uh, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and just kind of like go through and just see like break some stuff. It's sort of almost like doing science fair projects. Like I have fond memories of a couple of the science fairs we had in our junior high school, and then we didn't have them in high school. And so I feel like I lost something that I enjoyed greatly there. And kind like I've gone to a couple maker fairs, and it's just like it's almost like going to a science fair for adults. And over the years, I have a rather substantial collection of books of different types, some fiction, some nonfiction, some art, some what have you. But I have accumulated a few books, some of them fairly old, of like 101 surefire science fair projects. And some of them are like electroforming, like how to electroform. And it's like back in the day when you did real science for science fairs and not the volcano kit or ant farm, like when you did real projects, like I'm 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 not old enough to be this much of a geezer. No offense to anybody who feels like a geezer, but I I am chronically finding myself like kids these days, they don't know what a real chemistry set is. Because I had a real chemistry set. I had containers of chemicals whose names I still can't pronounce. And I did some amazing things with them. Chemistry sets these days are like vinegar and milk. Yeah, I grew up in a small area, so that might be part of it too. Yeah, growing up in small towns, it, like they just didn't have the fanfare for events. Like my town was so small that when I was much bigger when I was younger. I was a much heavier, bulkier person. And when I was in high school, I would have been perfect for a football team. But we're so rural that if we assemble like we were a regional high school, what that means is like the seven surrounding towns barely had enough kids to assemble into a high school. And so like if you assembled us all into a high school and of our high school you built a football team, there would be nobody to compete against because you'd have to go too far out into nowhere to reach the next major regional school. So our school was so small that there wasn't really like competitive football available. Yeah. I can't remember how big our graduating class was, but it wasn't particularly large. It wasn't quite as bad as like you're into Illinois, right? So out in your region of the world, um, I think it's like some of that area, maybe not as far north as you are, but like I've heard of some places in like Kansas where there's a graduating high school class of like five. And, like, can you imagine that? It's literally like they had to combine their elementary, junior high school, and high school all together in one, and you shared the same teachers, and just like a high school graduating class of five. Like, this boggles the mind. But yeah, I mean, we didn't have enough to really have a legitimate fencing club or a chess club, but I had a few friends that we would meet after school and hang out and do those kinds of things. Oh, Chicago. That is a city I passed around and went to a neighboring town. I think Chicago is a little too big city for me. Although weirdly, I did all right in New York City for a day or so, and then like Houston is huge. LA, I can't stand Los Angeles. Driving in Los Angeles is a nightmare. Like I'd rather drive in New York City. Now Seattle is scary to drive in. Seattle is nuts. I mean, they've built their city predominantly for walking, public transit, biking, and stuff like that. So it jam packs all the major car traffic onto certain arteries, and that's sort of all you get. And so it really makes for a choked up pathway. Um, I wasn't a huge fan of Orlando driving through Orlando either, but outside of those areas, like New Jersey, New York, um, Philadelphia, those areas are a little rough to drive through, and finding a place to stay in is a little hard. They're a little big city. Boston's a little tough sometimes too, but like I'm I'm from New Hampshire. We're like our biggest city is a town to places like Boston. Um, like we're barely a blip compared to New York City. So like looking at Chicago, yeah, that was one of those like I hear this area is a little rough. Not sure I want to be here. I got caught in a traffic jam outside of Chicago passing through the area, and it was like what should have been a half hour to pass through that area ended up being a 3 hour wall to wall. Some jerk just he he actually backed his car into me because he was frustrated with things. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Are you slammed your car into reverse on a highway and ignored the horn honking at you?" Yeah, I mean, I debate like I debate whether or not I could live in New York City for like a year. I visited a few times, but and like I've stayed a couple nights in New York City. I got mugged in New York City once. Wasn't all that big a deal, really. Um, it's an interesting story. Maybe sometime I'll talk about it. Um, and like overall, like this city is just so jam-packed. But I feel like if I were living in the city and not visiting it, like if I just got an apartment in New York City, like as expensive as that is, if I got an apartment in New York City and walked or used the public transit or got a bike, like it's easily navigate. You can easily navigate a lot of that area pretty reasonably. Like when I got to New York City the last time I took a bus down, I left the Port Authority bus terminal and walked down pretty much the entire island of Manhattan, and it was completely walkable. Like I could walk anywhere in the city of New York City in an afternoon. I'd probably have to take the subway over to some if I wanted to go over into like the Bronx or Chinatown. But yeah, I mean, it's walkable and uh, like it's got at least 5 or 6 different artist communities that you could participate in, and it's got um, I think I had when I did my looking around, it's got 4 or 5 maker spaces, and it's got a biohacking lab, and it's got like the Met Art Museum. It's got some science museums, some great history museum out there. Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. Like, there's a lot you can do in New York City. One of the most awesome bookstores is in New York City, The Stand, and or Strand, and then The Stand is a Stephen King book. Different makerspaces have started in different ways. As we go through the videos that I'm uploading gradually to my other channel, I do a Q&A with each space, and part of what I do is talk about like what did it take to start your space. And some spaces start with a group of people who meet together in somebody's garage to work on projects together. And some groups start as a group that meets once a month at a restaurant, and everybody talks about the projects they're working on and shows off a little show and tell. And once you accumulate enough people that regularly show up, then it becomes like how likely is it to be valuable for these people to potentially have access to a milling machine or an engine lathe or a wood lathe, band saws, table saws, so that we can split the cost of having valuable tools that enable us to do certain things, a 3D printer, a laser cutter, those kinds of things, where nobody in the group is necessarily going to be able to afford to throw down a couple thousand for a 500-watt laser. Um, but if they all pitch in a little bit in membership dues on a regular basis, they can start investing in the most sought after tools for the group. And then, like, you start to do that a little bit and you figure out what that cost can be. And then many of them start looking into things like filing as a 501c3, which is a nonprofit. And you can get grants and monetary support from corporations and sponsoring for starting one up, because a lot of places are interested in seeing them happen because they're places where people can prototype things out and start small businesses out of. And so a lot of companies and universities often like to support them. Oh, every makerspace has insurance and they have a waiver of some kind. Yeah. Um, it's everyone that I've been to has one. Um, they're all a little different, mainly because I've gone to different ones in different states, and the laws in different states must differ slightly. But yeah, so that's all. Like, some of them are nonprofits, and some of them are for-profit maker spaces, and the way that some of those are run are very interesting to see. There's one in Michigan, Make Works, I think, that actually teaches uh, a seminar on how to start a makerspace, and it's totally worthwhile. I think if you, I, I will, I will be posting. It's going to be a while before that one goes up in the queue. But like, if you look up the maker spaces in Michigan, the one in um, I'm pretty sure it's MakerWorks or MakeWorks. They share a lot of their information about what it takes to get that going, and they are a for-profit one. Um, but a lot of the things they do to run theirs are applicable to a lot of different styles of makerspace. Um, Running one as a 501c3 is a little more tricky because, like, it's like running any nonprofit. You really have to get a board together of people with experience in running nonprofits and volunteer organizations. But I mean, it depends on your population size in your area. Illinois is no. I have Iowa and Wisconsin are two I still have to get for my maker tours. I have to go back to North Dakota too. I visited one there, and he wasn't up and running yet. I did an interview with him and then said I'd come back and visit him for finishing up once he's got the place up and running. And I haven't heard back from him, and I've contacted him a few times. It's possible the space died, because that's one of the things that does happen in maker spaces is there's a fair amount of die off. Um, it's something that a lot of people would love to see work in their communities, but it's not uncommon for people to get in over the head trying to start one and not be able to sustain it long term. So you get that happens from time to time, and uh, some towns have a history of, like, one starts, fails, one starts, fails, one starts, fails, and then one just hangs on by the just skin of its teeth, and then it gradually grows, and, like, there is a threshold before they're self-sustaining. Uh, Usually they have open house nights that you could check in on. Also, look up maker fairs. If you've never been to a mini maker fair, um, they happen all over the country, and I'm sure there's got to be one that happens in your area. And they're a blast. It's like usually it's 1 to 2 days, and it's like a convention. And at this convention, you're going to find people who have these weird tinkering projects. The big ones are New York City and the Bay Area in California. They happen once a year. And like the one in New York City, I went to this past September, and like they have a dark room where people have these crazy light up projects, and they have a students project page, staging area where you could go in, and like there was one guy who was working on an Arduino style board that uses two micro air pumps to make pneumatic powered small systems for, like, one of the things he was doing with it is if you take a balloon and you fill it with small, like, buckwheat or something like that, tie it around the end of the tube, and it has this soft mushiness to it, and you press it down on an object, and you pull a vacuum in it, and those buckwheat beads clench around the object you have, and you have a device that can pick up oddly shaped objects and hold them firmly. And there's applications and robotic arms for that kind of design. And he built it also so that you could hook up like an air bladder that you could squeeze and it can sense pressure differentials for like a feedback controller. And I was like, that's one table out of 15 that was in a small section. And the guy doing his pneumatic system, I believe, was going to kickstart his project. And then all out among the rest of the science museum is you'll usually find them set up at science museums. But all around the science museum, there are just like hundreds of exhibits and different maker groups and designers, and like there's a sort of a vendor area too where like people from Italy and Germany and whatnot who are selling specialty types of 3D printer filament are showing off the filament and its capabilities. And it's just like, it's just a wonderful little playground to go check out. And mini maker fairs are a little like that, not usually quite as big and all inclusive, but you're like, I've heard of several of them going on in like rural states. Like you'll get, I think like Arkansas had their mini maker fair at one point in an area, and like you get people from all the surrounding states because it's just like an event like that doesn't happen very often in that area. So like if you can find one, if you go to Make website, the Make magazine website, and look or type in Maker Fair and see what comes up, and then there will be a list of mini. Like you can do a search for mini maker fairs in your area. It's a huge list. They happen all over the world, and they're a blast to go to because you can see all sorts of creative things that people are working on. Um, yeah, it's a bit of a wander from the general topics of this channel, but still like talking about some of it. But yeah, ooh, we're at an hour, aren't we? Yeah. All right. So tomorrow is review of what is it? Video game and board game. That's right. Yeah. So I'll review my experience of those events for their week this past 2 months, and then I got to figure out what I'm going to do for the next couple days before I head off to Honolulu, and what I'm going to do while I'm out in Honolulu. I know not a lot of people watch my movie live reacts, and I get it. I'm still going to keep doing them, but I may have to record the Ant-Man and Wasp one before I head out because I'm realizing I'm going to be still in the air by the time. Like I forget the time zone difference between Hawaii and the East Coast is like 6 hours, I think. And so, like what time it is by the time I land in Honolulu, it'll only be early afternoon for me, but it'll be well past 9 p.m. here or 6 p.m. here, which is when I usually start my movies. So that's probably not going to happen the way I would normally do it. Yeah, that's the next one on my list, Ant-Man and Wasp. I'm kind of curious about it. Like the first Ant-Man movie was like a nice, light-hearted adventure story that I really kind of dug, and it doesn't have some of the same um, like over seriousness that some of the other Marvel movies have. Um, so, although funnily enough, I watched Ragnarok the other night, and I found that one, Thor Ragnarok, was a little too goofy in parts of it for me. Like, I could handle the movie being that silly if the other half of the movie wasn't so serious. Like, real exploration of atrocities of your fathers, like how your civilization came to be what it is on the backs of conflict and war is an integral part of addressing where you come from and where your people come from. And that's a part of that story, like acknowledging where you came from and that's part of it was an important part of the story. And then they had these goofy slapstick moments that was just like it disrupted. Like if it were split into two movies, I would like both of those movies. I still like Thor Ragnarok. I just feel like pacing wise, it just kept interrupting itself, so I struggled with it. But Ant Man, the first movie with Ant Man is a good one all around. I think it's one of the better ones that Marvel did. Um, the Winter Soldier is, I think, by far one of the most intensely done and well executed spy action thrillers. And Civil War was okay. It was sort of like Act Two of Winter Soldier. So, in that sense, it's still a very good movie, but I think it doesn't live up to the second round of Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier, I think, by far is the best of them. Although I am a big Iron Man fan. We had a guy at our makerspace actually design and 3D print out an entire suit of Iron Man armor. He doesn't have the figure for it, though, so it doesn't really fit him great. But he's working on it. Um, but yeah, I was always really impressed with how much he had achieved with it. Because he built the gauntlets and he built them to have a light up thing in the palm, and he had the light up arc reactor in the chest. And I think he was working on under the mask doing a light up uh, eyepieces, but and he refinished the surface of them nicely. I got to talk with him about doing some of that kind of stuff. I don't know if he's still a member of the space or not. All right, so we're at an hour and 7 minutes. I've still got a little bit of a cold. I'm gonna see if I can sleep it off. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. Have a good night. Yeah, that you're. I mean, it gets plugged and then it just won't stop hurting. Yeah, the ear. But good night. All right, so